Hi everyone, this is Reed Wellock with Fifth Wall Solutions. Thanks for joining us for the 15-minute focus. For this focus, we're going to do manufacturing. Manufacturing is something, at least in our world with cyber insurance, is relatively new, only in that it became really a spike in demand in 2019. We saw it start in late 2018. By 2019, we saw a lot of manufacturing breaches. Took some time for that demand to make its way up, and here we are now in 2021, where manufacturing is one of the, if not the top hit and most commonly hit for cyber attacks. So hopefully this isn't too much of an uphill battle for you to talk to the client, but I was reading the most recent Verizon report, getting some new stats, and it looks like still between 37 and 40% of manufacturers today that are small, that are in the, I guess what you would say, SMB place, or even SME, still don't view their cyber risk as being very high. So there's still a lot of work that's cut out, I think, for most of you, if you have manufacturers in your book. So how do you break through that barrier? I would use a very, very simple and well understood attack method, which is ransomware. And I know that probably you're going to hear me say that for most industries, but for manufacturing, the reality is that is how they are being hit today. That's where we're seeing the most claims. That's where we're seeing the most damage. And it's really easy to do in the manufacturing space. You're seeing an industry that doesn't have a high level of preparedness. So we talked about nonprofits last, and I kind of drew that same line where you have easy targets based on the level of technology they have in place and the security measures they have in place. So they're easy targets, and ransomware is really quick and easy. If you look at the financial goals based on the last Verizon report, over 75% were financially motivated. The remaining were more for espionage, corporate espionage. And if you have a client where that actually may be a considerable threat, they really do need to consider that being a likely scenario that could play out. But for the vast majority, it's for quick financial gain. Because the reality of a manufacturer is when you bring things to a halt, there is no window of time of decision making where it's not going to have a drastic impact. 97% of last year's claims had BI, business interruption. So it goes hand in hand. Business interruption is a very big deal for manufacturing. If they're not able to, if all operations stop, that basically brings everything to a halt. It affects them, it affects their suppliers, it affects their clients, their customers. So at that level, you have an issue with reputational damage even. So let's just say they get through an event. What does the aftermath look like, right? On both the front and back end. On the client experience is one side, but then the partners that they have as a manufacturer, does that create any conflict? These are just questions to be asking. When we look at managing that and getting through that event quickly, crisis management is really, really important when we look at what a manufacturer needs to be able to start doing very quickly. And unless they have dedicated IT that actually knows how to navigate a cyber breach, of course, having a cyber insurance policy is really helpful because it can restore a lot of the financial loss. But actually having a quick path to follow can make all the difference, especially when every second that goes by where they're not able to operate is that critical. You want to make sure you're on the right path as quickly as possible. You want to make sure you're working with the right people. So having crisis management coverages also kind of forces that path, right? Working with an attorney, going through the forensics, providing notification. The longer you wait with those things, the worse it can start to get. So that's an area that you can focus on. If questions come up of, well, how, if I'm a small manufacturer in Western PA, why do I need to be concerned about cyber breaches? How does this happen? I understand, worst case scenarios, but what does that actually look like? I would keep it very simple. We're still in a world where employee error drives the majority of these claims, one way or the other. So you have either employees or partners going in that have access, but that is the lowest hanging fruit for a hacker. It is a lot easier to trick someone into doing something than it is to use brute force to get in through a front door. So that is typically the response I would give around how does this happen. It's employee error. Phishing is really at the top. But surprisingly, in the recent report I read, there is a lot of internal actors in the manufacturing space as well. Especially when you get to the more sizable ones where there's a high employee count. Upwards of 25% of the breaches involved internal actors last year. So that's notable. It's not always an external threat. The majority are external threat, but internal actors, as far as just granting someone access, or they themselves seen an easy payday because of how these types of breaches are so easily conducted now. It's really easy to go on the dark web now if you have the know-how and get a ransomware virus and plant that internally. You don't need to be a technical expert anymore. It's been commoditized where you can make very quick and easy purchases. So I wanted to hit on those quick, kind of why is it important, and then how does it happen. But then when you get to the actual policy, what's it going to do for you? When you look at ransomware, hopefully that's clear and evident. If you need to pay the ransomware, you need to have the funds, right? And not every time is that paid, but with a good policy, you're going to have that. So you want to make sure that's at the full aggregate limit. You want to make sure business interruptions at the full aggregate limit for the reasons I just mentioned, because that clock's going to start ticking right away, especially if it's a ransomware virus. Reputational damage, you want to make sure that is included for reasons I just mentioned. And last but not least, the crisis management portion. So we're talking forensics, we're talking legal, PR, notification, credit monitoring. These are all kind of this is the static flow of what a lot of breaches follow when PII is exposed. You want to make sure that's included and at the full limit as well, both for there to be the coverage for the client, but then also that very direct path the client can go on right out of the gate. Okay. At this point, and I know we came on late, but I also want to honor the fact that we try to keep these to 15 minutes or less. We have one question here. Will you help with the crisis management for a new policyholder? So I'm not sure exactly what's being asked there, but I can speak into the crisis management piece. So when that's most policies, if not all, and I'm going to use that lightly, but most, you're going to see crisis management is included. And I just mentioned the levels of what crisis management is typically included. It's the forensics, legal, you have notification, you have PR, and well, that's most of them. Those are going to be, even if it's a smaller policy, you're going to find those in even some of the endorsements. The concern you want to have, though, is making sure those are the appropriate limit. Those can quickly escalate. Those can be somewhere between 30,000 and 500,000, depending on the severity of the breach. How does it get that high? Really, the amount of PI that's exposed, right? That's going to be more in-depth work at the legal aspect, more in-depth for the forensics, and then ultimately, whenever notification and monitoring is required, you're going to have a lot more to cover based off of the number of PI that's exposed. And that typically is quarterbacked, and Kevin, I see you added planning. That's typically quarterbacked by the attorney, right? So you have a legal counsel that's usually at the helm of that's not only doing intake with the client, but then providing that facilitation with the third-party services and bringing them and involving them in. All right. We're close to the 15 minutes here. Let me just look at my notes here, see if there's anything else we wanted to cover. I think I'll just leave this here as I always do. This is the space where we are the main risk advisors. If you have a manufacturer that is still not sold on why they need cyber insurance, we are more than happy to help. Try to bring it down to earth. My sense is a lot of what's seen, particularly in the manufacturing space, it's the large global breaches, it's the big ones, it's the one that draw attention from the media. That's not doing you any favors because it creates the wrong perception that this is a big business problem. In the reality, it's not. It's the smaller manufacturers that are getting hit more. You just don't read about it, right? And because of the lack of preparedness with these smaller manufacturers, it's going to keep happening more and more and more. And I read one study where it said up to almost 50% of manufacturers in the U.S. have actually experienced a cyber breach at some point. Many of them just may not be aware, but that is increasing. right? So every year that goes by, the reality of the when, not if, gets closer and closer. So, all right, we're here at the top of 15 minutes. I thank you, everyone, for your time. Thanks for joining us. If you do have any additional questions, please make sure you put them in the comments. You can also reach out to us directly. And if you have any questions on fifth wall in general, what is it that we do? Please reach out. We're providing a lot of assistance right now, particularly with what the market is doing, with finding good policies, providing good programs, but then at the end of the day, just doing good consulting and facilitation for the sale of cyber. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.